What did she say?
Yeah, thank you.
I need to send a thing.
I forgot to log in yesterday. So
hello, we're here. We've gone live.
We're getting ready to start the Bible study. Get your Bibles and turn the book of Ruth.
Yep. And it's our Tuesday night study. And go ahead and get prepared for Ruth chapter 3 is where we will initially jump off at. And on page 73 in the booklets, I believe. We're actually kind of midway in that page there. So everybody ready? Glad to see you there, Mr. Corey. Let's go ahead and open in prayer. Father, we're thankful for all of your many blessings. We want to have an attitude of gratitude always, regardless of what's going on around us. We thank you that we have you in us and that we can interject positive where negative seems to live. We thank you, Father, for the atmosphere of heaven that we carry with us. And we just pray that that atmosphere would continue to permeate out of us as we go about our daily lives. Help us, Lord, as we study. Holy Spirit, we invite you to bring revelation to us as we continue our study in the book of Ruth. We thank you for preserving this word for us, and we thank you that we can learn anytime we open the word. And so we invite you to teach us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we have been following the book of Ruth, which is at the back of our, it's actually the last lesson in our study called When Men Do What's Right in Their Own Eyes. And we finished through the book of Judges, and then the book of Ruth is after the book of Judges. And the book of Ruth is there because it tells us the story of one obedient heart in a time of rebellion, because the book of Judges just shows us again and again how rebellious the Israelites were. And yet the story of Ruth shows us that there were some that were still being obedient to the word. And Ruth is a good example of that. Her story happens during the early part of the Judges, within about 50 years of when Joshua passed away.
Because Ruth was what? Boaz was the grandson of Rahab?
No, the son of Rahab.
Son of Rahab.
The son of Rahab and Salmon. We'll see
came
that
out of
tonight.
Jericho.
We'll see that tonight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so anyway, it all is about the story of, she was not even an Israelite. It was a woman who was of Moab. And the family of Elimelech moved to Moab because Elimelech was afraid to stay in Israel because of a famine that had hit the land. And then while there, his sons grew up and married women who were Moabites. And these two women were very different in their personalities. We saw that. But both the husband, or all three, the husband and both of the sons actually died while they were in Moab. And so Naomi, the wife of Elimelech, is left with these two daughters-in-law. And she decides she's going to go back to Israel, where her family is, where the inheritance is. And the two girls start to go with her. She tells them, no, there's no point in you trying to come with me. You might as well go back to your own families. I can't promise you anything, because Naomi didn't even know what she was going to get into when she got back to the land.
So her real thing, she was in such grief. She didn't really want them to come along. Just go back to your old lives.
Right, because she didn't know what she was.
No idea.
There's nothing I can offer you. Yeah, she goes, I can't even have any more sons. By the time if I even had any more sons, by the time they were of a marriageable age, it would be too many years. These women would be past childbearing age. There was just a lot of things that figured into her desire to have them stay where they were. And Orpah did leave and go back to her family, but Ruth refused. Ruth was so connected to Naomi, and as we've seen, she's just taken because of Naomi's influence, her godly influence. It's like Naomi has taken on her faith, and she actually seems to show more faith than even Naomi during all this
10 years,
time.
So
yes, they had lived in Moab for 10 years.
7, 8,
we don't know for sure. We just know
most of it.
I don't know if it had been for most of it, because it's interesting, she had no children, so the marriages may have been young marriages when the men died. But anyway, Ruth continues to go with Naomi. They go back to Bethlehem in Judah area, and Ruth immediately gets industrious and decides she's going to go out and try to help provide for her and Naomi. And so she says, I am going to go glean and help us get some
So
provision.
Naomi doesn't ask her to do this.
No, Ruth offers to do this. And so Naomi's very grateful. But Naomi has come back a very bitter woman, and it's been very difficult for her to go through all that she went through. And we discussed that quite extensively in previous studies. But we saw how once Naomi came back from her first day of gleaning, how she told Naomi of what had happened, because she had wound up in the field of a man named Boaz, and Boaz had showed her great favor and told her that she could glean, not to glean in any other fields, but to glean in his fields only. And he even instructed his servants to let her follow behind them and for them to purposely leave grain for her to have so that they could be provided for. But Boaz was immediately taken with Ruth because of what he had heard about her and her desire to take care of Naomi and her industriousness, her willingness to work. He was very impressed with her. Plus, she was probably quite beautiful.
Anita said she can see us now.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can see there. I see you. Okay.
I can see you now.
Okay. She said she could see us. Good. Anyway, so she continued. Naomi was pleased to hear it. She was excited. She goes, oh, wow, he's a relative. Don't go on any other fields. Keep on working his field. And so she did.
And that was for her protection as well as her blessing.
Exactly. And Boaz had instructed the overseer of the servants in the harvest to watch over her and protect her as well.
Leave her extra stuff.
Right. And so Naomi's excited, only gleaning in Boaz's fields. And so she did through the barley harvest and then on into the wheat harvest. And then you get to chapter 3, verse 1, and we want to reread there. So if you want to get there, chapter 3, verse 1, we're going to see when Naomi kind of decides to help God out a little bit in this whole situation of Boaz and Ruth. So, Rick, if you read for us Ruth chapter 3, verses 1 through 5.
1 through 5, New Living Translation. One day, Naomi said to Ruth, my daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you so that you'll be provided for. The Amplified says that you may prosper. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting him gather grain with his young women. Tonight, he'll be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath. Put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor. But don't let Boaz see you until he is finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. I will do everything you said, Ruth replied.
Okay.
So she,
that's it.
That's fine.
Okay. So you can see that Naomi is concerned about Ruth's future. She loves this young woman, and she's concerned about her being able to have a life and family and all of that. And it's very commendable that Naomi was concerned about that. And so she decides that she's going to try to help her kind of speed this thing along.
But she wasn't concerned about that when she left.
No.
Now she is.
Yeah, after some time, she now is concerned about
Just
Ruth.
a few months, a few weeks?
Yes. Well, it had gone from the barley harvest through the wheat harvest, so a few months had passed. And now you have to understand that neither Ruth or Naomi were schemers who selfishly plotted to try to trap Boaz into marriage. But it's like they were going to be available to cooperate with God in this instance. And the fact that Ruth just happened to work in Boaz's fields and had found favor with him encouraged Naomi to suggest that maybe God had a bigger plan going on here than what they thought to begin with. And so Naomi decided that there would be nothing wrong in seeing if Boaz would be open to the idea of being the kinsman redeemer. And we talked about the kinsman redeemer. Does anybody remember what that was about?
Someone who could redeem a relative from slavery or another bad situation.
Right. If they suffered loss, if someone had become poor and had to sell all they had, a kinsman redeemer could come in and buy what had been sold so that person's inheritance wouldn't be lost for the family. It's someone who came in to redeem it. It's provided for in the law in Leviticus, and we read the passages last week that talk about how that would happen. And the role of the kinsman redeemer included the right to buy or redeem the land of a deceased relative with the condition that offspring would be raised in the deceased man's name. so that no branch of the family would be cut off from their
It
heritage.
amazes me how important that line was to them.
Yes.
And today we don't think anything about it. Everybody does for himself what he can do. And
It's true. I was thinking about that today. You know, even old family photos don't seem to be as important to this generation now as they did before. You know, nothing that seems to be precious like that to this.
No, the ancestry
generations
thing,
now.
that's really in the Mormon belief.
Mormons are real strong with that. They keep very strong generational
but Christians
genealogy
really
lines
haven't.
that Christians have.
Not like the Jews.
To the Jews is very strong.
but the reason that the Mormons do it is because they think if they get all those relatives collected, they can pray them into heaven.
Wow, really?
Yes.
So kind of like purgatory with Catholics?
Mm-hmm.
They're in that purgatory, that place?
Yeah, they think if they didn't go into the Mormon church while they were here and alive, that they can pray them in.
So with the kinsman redeemer, this is a way to carry on your relative's
Was
line,
to carry on and
so
and
that
keep
that
an
ancestry
inheritance.
can still continue.
Yes, and so that it can continue on. And actually, most Jewish people that today that are full blood Jew could probably tell you which tribes they have come from through, because that it was so well
I think
preserved.
I told you Rami came from Levi.
From Levi,
Wow.
yeah. So
Isn't it interesting that when with Naomi, we don't know if her husband died first. I don't know if it says that, and then the boys.
Yes, the boy. He died first, then the boys later.
But when he died, it didn't cut off the line. But when the boys died,
yes, it
that cut off the line.
Yes.
And both boys and the dad.
Yes, but knowing this whole provision in the law about the kinsman redeemer is part of what prompted Naomi to give Ruth instructions about how she could approach him to see if he'd be willing to be the kinsman redeemer. Now, the way she decided to do it looks suspicious, but if there's anything improper here, it's Naomi's fault, not Ruth, because Naomi would have been the one to know the whole process. Ruth was just doing
looked
what
at
she was doing.
reality.
Is this a cultural thing, though?
It was done. It was a Jewish thing. It was not done in the pagan religions. It was in the law, and it was all part of keeping the family in line and the inheritance. The inheritance was so huge, especially once they got into the land. It was a huge deal.
So he's lying there. She uncovers his feet.
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But let's look at what she told her to do. Okay. It was true that Boaz was nearly related, as close kin to the ones that had been deceased. And it was the nearest kin that Naomi knew of. And by the law of Moses, and divine law, they would be supposed to be marrying the widow of Mahlon. She was the wife of Mahlon. And he was the eldest son of Elimelech, and he was dead. And so she's thinking in her mind, well, maybe I should remind him of this duty. Maybe Boaz hasn't thought about this. So if Ruth goes and reminds him about this, maybe he'll be reminded. She was thinking it was a convenient time to remind him of it. And also, it was Israel's tradition, even when a woman married a man and then he died, in the law there was a provision for any brothers of the man who died to take her on as their wife, so that line could be continued.
So we hear that story.
Yes, and so knowing that portion of the law, Naomi thought about, here she's thinking this is the Israeli tradition, and so there's nothing wrong with seeing if possibly he might want to do it, and so that's why she tells her to get all dolled up and go.
So
to
the
where he
Jews
was.
in Jesus' day asked him this question to trap him, when they said a man married a woman and then he died,
Right.
and then the brother married her
and then he dies, and then the
and
brother
so forth, 7
Yes.
brothers.
Uh-huh.
Whose wife
the
will she
husband?
be in
Mhm.
heaven? And they tried to trap Jesus
Right.
using this thing right
This
here,
very
right?
thing. Yes, the very law that's in Deuteronomy about that. Yeah, and he said, in heaven there is no marriage or giving of marriage.
Not like
Yeah,
that.
they're not like we have here on earth. All right, now so she tells him, she tells her, Ruth, that Boaz is down at the winnowing at the threshing floor.
Which
Now,
that
if you want to
means.
know what winnowing is, is the way that they would extract grain from the husk that's in the outer shell of the grains. And after the outer shell was broken by having animals step on. It's like they were out there to crack the outer shell. You know how in nuts you have to crack your outer shell? Well, you have to do the same thing with grain, wheat or barley. The outer shell has to be cracked, and then they had these kind of flat tray-like baskets, and that grain that had been cracked would be scooped up, and then it would be thrown up in the air in a place where there was a breeze that would go through, and the wind would carry away the outer husk, which is called normally the chaff. Okay, the outer husk is called the chaff. And so if they're blowing away the chaff, that means there's blowing away this outer husk that was from around the wheat. And so they would then, once the other grain would fall down, the chaff was gone, and then they would pour that into storage containers as grain that could be used for then further grinding if they wanted it in wheat, or for however they wanted to.
And this is what Samson was doing, right? But in like a hole in the
No,
ground?
that's what Gideon was doing.
Gideon. He
Yeah.
was winnowing.
He was in a wine press. He was trying to do it in a wine press.
Yeah, which really probably doesn't work.
Yeah, wouldn't work very well. So, in our generation, we look at what Naomi asked her to do, and immediately we think
Suspicious.
it's very seductive, and that Naomi's asking her to seduce her. And we think, well, man, why would a godly woman like Naomi tell her daughter-in-law to do this?
Get all dolled up, wait till he's high.
So,
because
yes,
the Moabite
exactly.
women were attracted
Yes.
to the Jewish
Right.
men, but
But
not.
it's because we don't have a understanding of Eastern customs either, and it's a fact that both in those times in the East, and even in some portions of the Middle Eastern and Eastern cultures, they do this thing where it was very common for the servants to lay at the feet of the master. And when they would be either out camping at night, they would lay there to protect the master. They would lay at their feet if he needed anything. They would be up, and then they would go and run and do whatever needed to be done. And there are even modern day accounts of Arab servants that still use this same practice. The Bedouins that still use this same practice, where the servant would lay at the feet of the master, or even the slave would lay at the feet of the master, and then they would be the servant just ready to get the instructions from the master. So it was an Eastern cultural thing, not a seductive thing that we think of, but in that culture, she was taking on a position of the servant as she was making this, I can't say proposition because she's not really propositioning this gesture or this. Yeah, she needs to suggest or remind him of what he may have already forgotten about being able to be the kinsman redeemer. So Ruth didn't even stop to question her. She didn't try to ask her if this is something in the law, didn't ask Naomi any of her motives. She just immediately, once Naomi gave her this idea, she immediately jumps to it, and she's willing to respond and obey everything
because
that
she
Naomi asked her to do,
Naomi.
because she trusts Naomi. Okay, so don't go into this thinking that this is some sordid thing. We have to keep in mind it's a different culture you're dealing with here than what we would normally think of. All right, let's continue on then, verses 6 through 13, and we'll see Boaz's reaction and then his wisdom and how he responds. Ruth, you could read for us 6 through 13. This is chapter 3.
Oh, 3. So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly and covered his feet and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your servant, Ruth," she replied. "Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz exclaimed. "You're showing even more family loyalty than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman.
Wow.
But while it's true that I am one of your family's redeemer, there's another man who is more closely related to you than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him. If he's willing to redeem you, very well. Let him marry you. But if he's not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I'll redeem you myself. Now lie down here until morning.
Okay, so we see that Boaz is really a good master to his servants, because when they went out, he was right down there with them. He wasn't sitting up at the big house just waiting for them, counting money while they're all out there working. He was down there in the middle of it, and then he would even eat with them. It said he was down there when he even had his supper there. And so he'd lay down to rest after this hard day's work at the threshing floor, and when he had laid down and gone to sleep, Ruth did go in, and it says that she uncovered his feet and then lied down at the end of his feet. Why do you think she uncovered his feet? Because Naomi had told her to do that. Why would
it was probably just part of the custom.
Okay, it could be.
But I'm sure it signified something.
Okay. Anybody have
Is the feet the place of humility?
It could be. But it could be just something, even as a natural thing. By uncovering his feet, the chill of the night would naturally wake him at some point, and so she could have her conversation with him. And here he
Hey, dummy, wake up.
And it did say that Boaz was startled, and actually in the Hebrew, when it translates, it could be translated that he shivered with cold.
Huh.
And so that's where some of the commentators get the idea that it was more to try to not, make him wake up, but yet let him get his feet cold, and he would turn over, or he would be more likely to come awake. And then he would see someone was there at his feet. Now, I know if my feet are cold at night, I can't sleep. I'm awake. I'm putting blankets on. I'm trying somehow, because it's hard to sleep when your feet are cold. That's for sure. But then he asks who's there. And so, of course, we know it's dark. And then she tells him that it's her. She says, I am Ruth. And she says, I've come to put myself under your protection and asking you to be my redeemer. And in the King James, the New King James, it states that she says, please take me under your wing. But literally, the Hebrew translates the way that the newer versions, which Jakua read, to spread the corner of your garment over me. And that is not a seductive thing either. It's not climb in bed with me type thing. It's like some people would try to do it. The culture there, again, had this practice of casting a garment over someone who was being claimed in marriage. It was a tradition.
Well, in my Bible, it says that Boaz was afraid.
Startled is what mine says.
In verse 8. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you
turned himself and beheld a woman lay at his feet.
Mm-hmm. So he was startled with a dream, maybe?
He was surprised.
Surprised. Okay. And some say that he was awakened because of the being cold. Whatever, the shivered with cold is what one of the translations is as well. So it could have been any of those things, but he did wake. And when she says this from Hebrew, it says, spread the corner of your garment over me. And this was referring to their Eastern tradition of when someone was being claimed in marriage, they would be given a garment that would be laid over them as basically kind of what we would think of as staking a claim, in the sense of, this one will be my wife. And it doesn't imply that that she's asking for a midnight affair. That is not what she's asking for. And there is actually a biblical reference to this practice in Ezekiel 16:8. God is actually talking about the nation of Israel. And I'll just read it for you. It says, when I passed by you again and looked upon you, indeed your time was the time of love. So I spread my wing over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into covenant with you, and you became mine, said the Lord God. So that's in Ezekiel, where it's actually makes reference to that covering over you, or spread my wing over you, to spread the garment over. Okay, now from what we've seen in the story so far, you get the idea that Boaz thought Ruth's behavior was highly inappropriate?
No.
Not at all.
Seems normal.
Yeah, so it didn't mean, you can tell he didn't think she was coming on to him or trying to seduce him in any way, but he seemed like it was a normal thing, even though he was startled out of sleep. He was not, he did not think that her behavior was
inappropriate. But you'd be
inappropriate.
surprised to see a foreign woman doing this and honoring their culture. That was a pretty big deal.
Well, sure, and notice how he responds to her. It's interesting to me because he didn't just jump her bones either, like some people would think, especially in our today's society. And he said, oh, there's this woman here, and then today Hollywood would make it all lurid and awful. That's not what's going on here. He knew that her request was honorable, and he treated her honorably.
This is interesting.
He knew that it was no sinful, lustful thing.
Rahab was his mother.
Yes.
And she must have totally embraced the Jewish culture and customs, because this was not surprising to him. He was well versed in this,
right,
and a man of honor.
Right. And you could tell by the way he responds to Ruth, because first he speaks to her, he calls her a woman of virtue. So apparently he's already noticed her. And her version said everyone in town.
Yeah, everyone in town.
Everyone in town knows you're a virtuous woman. Yeah. So apparently she had a great reputation of even being virtuous. And he was impressed with her kindness to leave her home country and all of her family and come with her mother-in-law all the way to Israel, to a new place, and to then offer to take care of her. It's amazing to him. He was a bit older than she, because most of the young women did marry very young. And he may have already had noticed her beauty and had thought it'd be wonderful, but maybe he thought he was too old for her and didn't. So he just maybe dismissed the thought, or thought maybe he didn't have a chance with her. Why did
the kinsman redeemer idea come to him?
Yeah, for whatever reason, we don't know. We're not told all of the story. Sometimes I think they give us too few details, because I'm the one, I want to know. I'm an inquiring mind. I want to know, but we don't. There are a lot of it we don't know. We just have to take from study of culture and history to try to get as much detail as we can.
It sounds like you considered it though, because when she brought it up, you said that you have another relative.
So maybe
to you. So he
had thought of it.
Thought about it.
Yeah, but then he was thinking the other person would have the right.
So the nearest,
true.
The nearest relative.
It was usually the nearest.
Right.
Yes, it had the first right.
And if he didn't want it, then
yeah.
I mean, because he said about her reputation in town, and then there's other relatives. So it's not like he was doing it.
Isn't that like with purchasing land? You can get a first right of refusal.
Sure,
so you
similar.
have the first right to
turn it down, right?
Make an offer.
But that makes it sound awful.
No, but that's kind of the business view.
But that is true. What was going on there? Because the kinsman redeemer, most of the time, it had to do with land, and in this case, there was going to be a woman that was going to be attached to getting this
property,
land.
and then anything attached.
Yeah, seemingly that's how it works. But he tells her not to fear, and then he promises her that the kinsman redeemer situation would be accomplished, that he would take care of it immediately. But he had to make it conditional.
But didn't this kind of put her in place? He can marry you, but if not, I will be your kinsman redeemer.
Okay, yeah, because he knew.
Doesn't that make it like, what did Naomi get me into?
Right, he knew of another kinsman that was closer relative that would have the first rights, like you said. But then he just tells her, just rest, lay down and rest. It was the middle of the night, and he says in the morning that he wouldn't take care of it in the morning. He was going to take care of it. If the other kinsman refused to do his part to redeem her, that he would marry her, redeem the land, and then repair the family line for her. And so that was really touching, actually.
This is like a romance novel in the Bible.
It's sort of like that, yeah. And Hollywood has done stories on Ruth, and they, of course, embellish the whole love story angle of the whole thing. And indeed, it could probably be there. We're just not given all the details of it. But instead of, like I said, instead of him trying to jump all over her as if she were trying to seduce him, he blesses her almost like a father because he calls her a daughter. And then he encourages her like a friend. And then he promises her security one way or another. One way or another, you're going to be taken care of.
Kinsman or
yes. He swears to her that she will have a redeemer. If the other man doesn't do it, I will do it. So you will have a redeemer one way or another.
That was quite a commitment by him.
Yes. So how do you see Boaz now from what we've seen so far about Boaz? What do you think of him? Honorable. Any other thoughts about Boaz? Intelligent.
A little older, but wealthy.
Wealthy.
Wise.
Okay. Seemed to have integrity. Because he could have just said, oh, sure, I'll be your redeemer, and not even mentioned the closer relative. If he really, truly was that attracted to her, he could have just skipped that whole part. But he was trying to do the right thing and do it in the right way. And so you can see some integrity there. We know that he was a kind master, which is good. So we know that he's a kind man. So you can see there, for being the son of a harlot, he was definitely raised pretty well.
So kind of forgetful. He was very loyal to his workers.
Why was he forgetful?
Well, he forgot about the kinsman redeemer. Oh, yeah.
Well, or like who has said,
so
maybe he thought of it.
Magoo.
No, maybe he thought of it, but thought he didn't have a chance because there was a closer relative.
Yeah.
And so he
in his dreams.
And because of him being older than her, so that could have been part of it. All right. So then in the morning, we're going to see here Boaz gives her some instructions. He told her in the night, he says, I will take care of it. You just go ahead and sleep, and then we're going to take care of this in the morning. And so verse 14 to 18, Jess, he gives her some instructions.
So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. Then Boaz said to her, bring your cloak and spread it out. He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, what happened, my daughter? Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today.
Okay. So in the morning, he gets her up, dismisses her, and counsels her, don't let anybody know that you were here at night. And he didn't want her reputation tarnished or anything like that. And then he sends her home with what my version says 6, yours says 6 scoops. Mine says 6 ephahs, which is about 6 bushels of barley. This is a large measure of grain.
How could she carry all that?
Well, field workers did that all the time. She used her shawl, which would have been a huge piece of fabric. 6 bushels of barley would be about 80 to 90 pounds, and which would not be unbearable for a field worker. And we think today, I mean, that sounds enormous, but people who are field workers are very strong. My mom says she was 7 years old out in the cotton fields, and she would pick 100-pound bags worth of cotton, just like the adult men did at 7 years old. She was that strong. Yeah, she would just drag it along behind her. 100-pound bag. Yeah, 100-pound bag at 7 years old. She was out there doing that. And so when I saw this, I thought, wow, I don't think I could have ever lifted 80 pounds. I don't think I could have ever lifted 80 pounds like that. But anyway, why do you think Boaz sent her away with this grain? Because you can view it from a lot of different angles of why he sent her away with this grain. Any ideas?
Like when he told the men to leave extra for her.
Right. Okay. He's trying to help in the provision.
Do you think it's almost like a pledge?
Okay. Maybe it was an expression of acceptance for her,
or of love.
Maybe yes. If he already had that affection for her, it could have been definitely an affectionate gesture.
He knew she was virtuous and a hard worker.
And his desire to provide for her. Also, though, it provided what? Go ahead.
Well, she spent the night over there, so if people see her walking from that area, they'll be like, "What are you doing here?" But
is she willing to scream?
Just like
Exactly. That was my next thing. It gave a reason for Ruth's presence at the threshing floor, because anybody she came across who saw her coming, like Akua just said,
you did that last night?
They would assume, oh, she's carrying the grain. She came early for a supply of grain before it got hot in the day. You know, so he's protecting her reputation. He's showing acceptance. He's showing his heart of a desire to want to provide for her. And it was also so Naomi could know that Ruth wasn't sent away in disgrace because of her actions of what she did. So there was a lot in his instructions there, what he told her, that shows us even more about Boaz. We can tell he was very tender towards her already. And he had had very few interactions with her, but yet he was very tender towards her already. Now, notice that Ruth does everything that Boaz tells her to do, right down to the letter. She goes home. She shares with Naomi what had happened. And after hearing what Ruth had to say and seeing the barley, Naomi, I can just see Naomi kind of shaking her head knowingly. And she says, just be patient. He's going to take care of this. It's almost like she's thinking to herself, yeah, Boaz is going to do whatever he has to do to marry her. This is a done deal. She kind of gets this.
When she saw the 65, this guy's serious. This
guy is going to do whatever he has to do to take care of this girl. And so it's almost like she just has this knowing. And that's what she was hoping for when she sent Ruth to do this thing. Okay, so let's go on into chapter 4. And we're going to see.
The last verse there, Naomi says to her, be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. This man won't rest till he settles things today. Mm-hmm. So she knew that according to custom, this was a done deal. It was going to get done today regardless. Whatever happened would be done for the end of the day. Oh, yeah.
And she knew because of this gift of the barley and her coming back, she knew he was seriously going to take care of her. And that was exactly what she was hoping for. Okay, so let's look at what happens then when he does. Ruth chapter 4, verse 1 through 8. Jeremy?
Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you. So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses.
Wow.
And Boaz said to the family redeemer, you know Naomi, who came back from Moab? She is selling the land that belonged to our relative, Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it. Buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I'm next in line to redeem it after you. The man replied, all right, I'll redeem it. Then Boaz told him, of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. Then I can't redeem it, the family redeemer replied, because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it. Now in those days it was custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, you buy the land.
Okay, so Boaz was true to his word to Ruth, wasn't he? He immediately, that morning, went ahead and sets up a court session basically at the city gate. Yeah. He calls together the elders of the city gate. Now, why was Boaz so hasty? Why so fond of this match? Ruth wasn't rich. She was a poor stranger. Could it be he already did love her? It kind of seems that way because he wasted no time in trying to take care of this thing. Now, and of course we saw he already expressed admiration for her virtue, but it kind of really does look like he already did love her. And this was not a normal court day, but he gathered together 10 men of the elders of the city to sit with him at the town gate, which is where all the town business was transacted. And the community elders would come there, and they were endowed with the authority to confirm or deny any legal transactions or business transactions that were to be done that day by anybody who came wanting to do this. and they were kind of like what a city council or a town council would be like today. Maybe a mayor, we have a mayor and city councils. That's kind of how this was. The elders of the city would come together, and then these judgments would be taking place, legal matters.
What does he mean when he says, and the near kinsman said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance?
Yeah, we're going to look at that in just a second.
That'll be interesting if she's
Why would that matter?
Okay. Well, first off, the guy says he wants to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And first off.
When it was the land owned.
Yes.
Yeah.
When he gets them all there, and he tells them right away, he brings notice all the elders are there. He brings in the guy, he knows who he is, who's the closest relative, brings him there and says, you know what, here's this land, it's available, you can be the kinsman redeemer. And he jumps at it right away. I'll buy the land. Yes, I want it. And then he drops on him the fact that along with the land comes the wife. Comes the wife, Ruth the Moabite, and he would have to take her for wife and sire an heir for the inheritance.
I have a really good title for this lesson.
What's that?
A woman complicates things.
Oh, oh, you think
because,
so?
Yeah. He was good with the land, but throwing the woman, he's like, dude.
Okay. Why do you suppose, that was one of the questions here, why do you suppose the relative didn't go for the deal once he heard he would have to marry Ruth? And there are several possible reasons.
Was he already married?
Okay.
Yes.
He most likely was already married.
Wife
and so that could cause some real problems having another wife in the house.
Didn't they have multiple wives?
A lot of them did. We know that through our studies about Jacob and, all different ones, many of them. The kings had multiple wives.
And that messed up a lot of stuff.
But yet maybe he was concerned what having this additional woman would be,
could have a right to his
problem
estate.
there. Okay, right. And he knew that but if he did this land would not really truly belong to him. It would belong to the son that he would have through this woman. Okay, and he would not gain any profit from this land because the son would be along Elimelech and Mahlon's line. It would not be his line of inheritance. So it could be that he just maybe couldn't afford the financial impact of buying the land and then taking on a wife as well to the whole thing. But also, there's another big, huge reason that's possible here why he would not do this now that he hears Ruth is part of the deal.
He's really old.
She's a Moabite.
That's it. She is a Moabite.
Yeah.
Yes, remember what we read about how the Israelites were not supposed to have anything to do with Moabites or anything to going with that whole bit of anybody.
So you suppose
a Moabite.
Boaz said, there's a Moabite widow that's attached to this land.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure he said it that way.
Yes. Now, why do you think that didn't bother Boaz? That she was Moabite? Because his mother was a foreigner too, and she had been brought into the line, and he knew that he knew Ruth's character. He had observed her character, and he knew that there was no. He did not feel like that was a problem for him.
They didn't look down on him because
it didn't seem
his
like
mother was.
It didn't look like, no. Apparently in fact, the way he gathered together the court at the gates, it seems like he may have himself been one of the elders in the community.
Had authority.
Yes, and so he already had position probably because of his wealth. He had position in the community. So whatever the reason was, it could be, I think, either the idea that he had to marry a Moabitess, or the idea that any land that he bought wouldn't be for his profit. It was going to go to an heir. It would not, and then that could mess up his if he had other sons already. That could make real trouble in the family with his estate messed up with this other heir that he'd have to sire through the Moabitess. And so once the woman was thrown into the package, he was not willing to do this at all. But and I kind of wonder if Boaz thought that might be the case.
Oh yeah, he had that.
And that's why.
I think that's why he worded it.
Why he worded it the way he did. If he will not do it, I will marry you. And okay, but this this whole thing, no matter what the guy's reasons were for refusing, once there was a woman involved in the whole thing, the whole thing was fairly handed to Boaz because the man refused it. And they sealed the agreement with the sandal ceremony. And so in this case, the one who was in line to be the kinsman takes off his sandal and he gives it to the one making the contract with him. And he states that whatever right he had in the land, I now have transferred to you as the next kinsman in line. And that's what the sandal ceremony
I noticed somebody said that with that, it means that I have walked the land, and now this gives you the right to walk the land.
To walk the land.
I thought that was fascinating.
Well, when we read about the sandal ceremony back in Deuteronomy 25, we saw that in the case where a widow's dead husband's brother would not take her to wife, to sire a child for the inheritance, that she got to remove the sandal, spit in the guy's face, and let him be dishonored because he refused to fulfill his lawful duty as the Redeemer.
When the U.S. invaded Iraq, that people started taking their shoes off and throwing them at the portraits of Saddam Hussein, because it was very dishonoring to do that. Very dishonoring. Well, it's like somebody threw their shoe at George Bush when he went there. That was a dishonor in their culture.
Yeah, I don't know that had anything to do with this particular thing. It may mean something differently in the Arab case.
The brother didn't. His obligation took the shoe, and it's a dishonor.
Now, to some, they may think that this guy was dishonorable because he didn't do it. But I think that Boaz was hoping that was going to be the case the whole time, because Boaz was right there ready. Okay, so we got to think about this, kinsman redeemer, and think about it again. And I put a definition there because when you think, you got to remember what the word redeem actually means. Okay. What does it mean to redeem something? Because in this case, Boaz is basically redeeming Naomi. And there are a lot of different definitions. And so I think I put it in your booklets there. It means to buy back, to free from what distresses or harms, like being freed from captivity by payment of a ransom. It also means to release from blame or debt. Also, it means to free from the consequences of sin. Didn't I have this in there? Okay.
Yeah.
To repair and restore, to remove the obligation of by payment, to atone for, or to rescue. So all of those phrases have to do with what it means to redeem something. Okay. So then if that's what it means to redeem, what is a redeemer? It's someone who redeems. Okay. So when you look at this definition, I always get excited when I look at this definition, because who do we say is our Redeemer? Jesus. Jesus was our Redeemer. And so look there, I put some places for you to fill in the blanks, because it's awesome to think about this, thinking about Jesus as our Redeemer based on this definition that there are the several definitions that I've given you there. Okay, so Jesus paid a great price to buy us back from the ways of sin. What page are we on?
Page 74.
74. Okay, so it's on page 74.
Towards the bottom.
So the fill in the blank on that part is he paid a great price. Does everybody see it? Okay, Jesus paid a great price. And after tonight, this is going to be your homework after tonight, is to think on what this means, because this is huge. Jesus paid a great price to buy us back from the ways of sin. Okay, also it said to free someone. And so Jesus frees us from what distresses or harms us. He frees us from captivity or bondage by paying the ransom necessary to get us back. He did that. He paid the price to get us back, to free us from our captivity to sin, from the bondage of sin. That is just so awesome to me. It's awesome. Also, he did what was necessary to release us from blame or debt. So not only are we freed from the bondages of sin, not only has the price been paid, but he also has done everything that's necessary for us to no longer even be blamed for the sin that we had committed, or the sin that's been in our life, or any debt of sin.
Well, imagine with blame comes guilt.
Yes.
And that tremendous guilt. It's like, I think of the girl this weekend that ran into that crowd and killed 4 people. injured, what, 22?
27.
27, and she was apparently
It
drunk.
was a homecoming parade at Oklahoma State College, and there was a group of people lined up for the parade, and a drunk driver went flying into the sidewalk.
Into the crowd. Killed 4 people.
One of them was a 2-year-old baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
And imagine the blame and the guilt that she will face the rest of her life.
sure.
And then the charges too.
They're trying her as intentional. Like
Yeah.
they're saying she did it on purpose.
Because of
the drunk.
Because of being a drunk. Wow, that's crazy.
25
But the
years
blame, the
old,
guilt that
20.
goes along with blame. So by him releasing us from the blame, he can also do away with any guilt
Yeah.
associated with what we have done. And that's an awesome, awesome thing. Also, he freed us from the consequences of sin. What was supposed to be our consequence? Eternal death. The wages of sin is death. And so he freed us from the consequences of sin. Oh, this is astoundingly amazing. Okay. Then it also, one of the definitions says that you can repair and restore. That's also one of the meanings of redeem. So he repairs and restores us.
You think of somebody who
That's
restores
awesome.
furniture, like antique furniture,
Mhm.
makes it as good as new. You think Jesus brings us back to what we were intended to be. Repairs
And
all that
restores.
brokenness and restores.
Mhm.
Gives you everything that was lost during that time.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, he removes all obligation of payment from us. Okay, that's what he was going to be doing as a kinsman redeemer. He was going to be removing any obligation of any debt that was involved, and that's what Jesus did for
So
us.
by
He
doing
removed
this,
all
does
obligation.
Boaz pay Naomi for the land of her sons?
He pays for whoever purchased it, or whoever sold it, or whoever owed any debt or owned the debt on any of the land that belonged to
Because he
Elimelech and
left
her.
because it was really bad here.
Right. But he left his land. So we're not told if he sold the land beforehand, but after the land laid a certain amount of time,
It was 10 years, though.
someone would buy it, and they had been gone 10 years. And so he's removing any obligation for Naomi or Ruth to have to pay any payment from that. And that's what Jesus does for us. He removes all. Oh man, that's amazing. When you start thinking about how powerful this word about Jesus being our Redeemer is, it's astounding.
And even more astounding is this is a picture of Jesus as our Redeemer with the son of the prostitute who was saved from Jericho.
Yeah.
Only she and her family. Everybody else died.
Right.
And
Her life itself is a
we don't
picture
know
of
if he was
redemption.
alive. Probably not. He probably wasn't in Jerusalem, Jericho.
Who?
Boaz.
Oh no, she hadn't married his
Okay.
father yet.
Okay, so he was born in their wandering.
Yeah.
And taken over the land.
Right.
And then he's involved in this kind of picture of Jesus, Messiah.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Yes. And the last thing there about Jesus is that he atoned for and rescued us. And in a way, Boaz was doing that because Naomi and Ruth, neither one really had much of a future unless someone married Ruth and then enabled them to be able to have the land and continue on with inheritance. So, but when you think about the word redeem and all that it means, and then we think about Jesus being our Redeemer, all of these things are wonderful things to meditate on and think about. It's what a wonderful Redeemer we have. And what's amazing too is that our Redeemer wants intimate relationship with each one of us. Okay, and that's an awesome thought, because not only was he willing to pay the price for us poor, wretched people who were slaves to sin, but he wants a love relationship with us as well. Just like Boaz desired, he not only just wanted to redeem her in the financial end, he wanted a love relationship with her.
Amen.
And that's what he wanted. And so Boaz is often seen as a type of Christ because he was willing to pay the price, and he loved Ruth. And that was his motivation. Love was his motivation, just like Jesus.
Because Mary was a virgin and had Jesus, there had to have been a lot of talk about, you know what, she was pregnant before they got married.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was minded to put her away.
That's what
And so there had to have been a lot of talk about Jesus and his authenticity. And I'm sure Boaz had to face stuff, even though it was
Jesus
wonderful
probably
that
faced it all
Rahab
his
was
life.
redeemed out of Jericho.
Mhm.
There had to have been some, what's the word for it? when people kind of look down on you? Some discrimination against him and his family?
Probably.
Intentional?
Yeah, could be. But yet it tells us about Rahab that when she was saved from the Jericho situation, that the Israelites brought her in as part of them. And then it tells us that she married Salmon, and that will be related here in just a minute. And think about, yes, they had the wandering years. We don't know how long into the wanderings, the whole thing. Well, no, it was after the wanderings. Jericho was after the wanderings.
They were entering
yeah.
the at the very
so
beginning.
It had to have been within this 50-year time period of when Joshua.
Within the first 5.
After Joshua's death, and that was a few years into their settlement of the land. So, but still, the whole thing of him being a type of Christ, as if a kinsman redeemer. Now, when you think about it's a kinsman, you think about a close relative. Well, in our situation, with what Jesus did for us, we are brought into God's family, and we often refer to Jesus like our elder brother. He was a kinsman. He became a kinsman redeemer for us.
Doesn't this take place in Bethlehem?
Yes.
Which will be the birthplace of Jesus.
Yes, because they were in Bethlehem. Yeah, so it's an amazing picture of redemption when you read the story of Ruth. So not only is it a love story that's beautiful, which I wish they would give more details about, but just to know how it all came about so we could all go, ooh, and aw. Aw. But the thing of the picture of redemption that it provides is also amazing when you understand the whole thing, purpose of kinsman redeemer. All right, let's see what happens when Boaz does claim his bride, because he's taking care of things at the city gate, and the kinsman has refused, and the sandal ceremony has taken place, and now in verses 9 through 12. Sally, you have it there, chapter 4, 9 through 12. When Boaz is going to claim his bride.
9. And Boaz said unto the elders and unto all the people, Ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech, and all that was Chilion and Mahlon of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren. And from the gate of this place ye are witnesses this day. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. Jehovah make the woman that is come into thy house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel, and do thou worthily in Ephrathah, and be famous in Bethlehem, and let thy house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bare unto Judah, of the seed which Jehovah shall give thee of this young woman.
Okay, so before all the witnesses, Boaz stakes his claim. He now sees his way clear to perform his promise that he made to Ruth, and he publicizes the marriage contract between himself and Ruth the Moabitess, and states publicly, I have purchased all the estate of Naomi's family, anything that belonged to Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion, and anyone holding a mortgage or lien on their property. Basically, he's saying, if you hold any debt in their names, you come to me, I will pay. I will pay the price, and he would give them the money. And so he's making that statement.
You wonder if he's been thinking all this time as a bachelor, and apparently an older bachelor, what is going on? I've worked all my life. I've done all this. I've provided all this wealth, but to what ends? What is it good for? And then this happens to him. And then all of a sudden, everything begins to make sense. The plans and purposes of God coming to pass. And what an incredible picture for us.
Yes, it's amazing.
Is that brain going there, Mrs. Cole?
She's skipping ahead. Okay. Now, he also says he's purchased the widow of Mahlon to be his wife, and he's determined that he is going to preserve the memory of his dead kinsman and would provide for their family's future. So all the witnesses then respond by offering a blessing. And even the senior elder there, that was normally the case. The senior elder of the city would make that blessing and even make it a prayer. And the rest of the elders and the people would join in. So it's all spoken by all of them. It says there that they all said it, that they prayed this blessing over them. And when you look at what they asked for, when they prayed, made their blessing, they prayed for Ruth, which I thought was interesting because normally the Moabitesses were considered anathema. It's like, no, you can't have that, nothing with the Moabite. But once he redeemed her, they changed their attitude about the whole thing because now she is the wife of one of our statesmen here. And they prayed that God would make her a good wife and a fruitful mother. They also prayed for Boaz.
But they said like Rachel and like Leah.
Okay, right.
So that included her in the line.
Right. But they pray for Boaz, that the wife would be made a blessing in all the affairs of the house, that the husband would be a blessing in the businesses in town, that they would be wise and virtuous and successful, and then prayed for the whole family. And by saying the blessing of letting your household be very numerous, let it greatly increase and multiply, just as the house of Perez did. Or some say Perez, depending upon your version. One version says Perez, and other versions say Pharez, P-H-A, the same guy. And the Bethlehemites were of that line anyway. And their prayer meant that they wished that the family of Boaz would be as of the branch of Perez was, that they would become numerous and great in Israel, just like the family line of Perez did. So they accepted her into it, his family. And of course, Naomi was still there. And that was a wonderful public proclamation, which is like what a wedding ceremony is. So a wedding ceremony is a public proclamation before witnesses. It doesn't say that she's there. It just says that he has chosen. It was at the city gate. Yeah, all this was at the city gate. It doesn't say that she was actually there, but he's making the public pronunciation. This is what I'm doing. I've announced that she is to be my bride. I am taking care of kinsman redeemer responsibility.
Wedding starts in 3 days.
Well, their wedding feast are usually a week long. But of course, he would not have to go through the whole thing of going to build the house for his new bride. He already had a home. He already had settled into land. He was already a wealthy landowner. And so that part was already taken care of. All right. And then verse 13 to 22, we'll see that Ruth as a wife and mother. Rick, if you want to read this last bit. And then next week, we're going to analyze the life lesson that we learned from her.
So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant. She gave birth to a son. I wonder if she wasn't able before.
Well, we know there were no children from before.
Then the woman of the town said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the baby and cuddled her to her breast. She cared for him as if he were her own. The neighbor woman said, "Now at last Naomi has a son again," and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is the genealogical record of their ancestor, Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David.
Okay, so here we see her brought into this family line because she married Boaz. Now the family's name and inheritance is preserved because Ruth becomes Boaz's wife. In fact, earlier in the passages, there was a point where Boaz actually prayed a blessing over her that she would receive a full reward for her diligence in what she had done for her mother-in-law. And now he had actually become the answer to his own prayer of what he said to her when the first time that they met. We see that Ruth becomes a mother. And she names this boy, it was a boy named Obed, and the name Obed means servant.
He may have been naturally too old to have children.
Could be.
But it says God
enabled her
provided.
to we see that Ruth is still a faithful daughter-in-law to Naomi as well, just as she always was. And Naomi had the joy of helping her take care of the new baby. And in fact, Naomi's friends and family tell her that because of Ruth's great love for her, you actually have a daughter-in-law who is better than having 7 sons, because of how close Ruth was to her and how much great love she had for her. So the bonds of love and friendship proved stronger than those of nature. In this case, is a great tribute to Ruth when they say that. And then we see it tells us that her future and her family were secured forever because her name is recorded with honor in the Bible. Naomi's life message had brought Ruth into God's family, and Ruth in turn brought new life into Naomi's family, which is interesting how that circled around, because Ruth was brought into Naomi, and then Ruth in turn, I just think that's amazing. Ruth in turn brought life back to Naomi's family, and Naomi's friends rejoiced with her over her new grandson. And of course, that grandson would become the one who would take the inheritance that had belonged through Elimelech's line. And that grandson would have that name in Bethlehem. And so also we see from that passage that Ruth is brought into, because of what happened, she's brought in among the ancestors of King David, which ultimately means the line of Christ. Yes.
Just like his mom.
Yes, which was the greatest honor because of what had happened, because of the faith, because of following the influence of this godly, or the faith of godly Naomi. Even when Naomi wasn't showing a whole lot of faith, when she was bitter and having a hard time with things, Ruth still embraced Naomi's faith in God, just like Rahab had embraced faith.
Obed had a foreign mom,
yes,
just like Boaz did. But Obed had a foreign mom and a foreign grandmother,
yeah,
who were grafted in,
who were brought in. Yes,
yeah.
It's a wonderful picture.
Yeah.
And Ruth is brought into the line of David, the line of Christ, which is the greatest honor. She's King David's great grandmother. Okay, so Ruth is King David's great grandmother, and this genealogy there goes all the way from Perez through Boaz and Obed to David, and also leads to Messiah. And so here we have a Moabite enemy alien brought into the line of Messiah, all because of her great capacity to love and her life of obedience, which is truly amazing. Her great capacity to love Naomi. She loved that woman, left her family, left everything she'd ever known to go be with that woman and help her in every way she could. And here then she ends up being brought into the line of Christ. And to me, it's a great, amazing story of redemption, how that family line happened, especially when you think of the harlot being brought in, Rahab, the harlot being brought in among the Israelites and being redeemed in that sense. And then here we see how Ruth was brought in and redeemed in that sense. So it's just amazing to me. The whole story is truly amazing, especially since this particular incident happened during the time period of the Judges, when things in Israel were bad.
What's the title of the series?
When men do what's right in their own eyes.
And this part is one woman.
An obedient heart in a time of rebellion.
An obedient heart.
In a time of rebellion.
God, what a picture.
Yes, it's amazing. That's why I think it's wonderful. A lot of people say, why is that story in there? I think it's a wonderful story that's there to show us that even in the midst of Israel's great rebellion, there were some people who didn't rebel against God. And there were some amazing stories that took place. And the great favor that came upon that family because of what happened. It's just truly amazing. All right, now from what we've seen in the story, do you see any negative qualities of Ruth's character at all? Do you see anything? Yeah, by the time, all the other studies we've done about different females in the body, in the Bible, we found some negative qualities and a few positive qualities, all the way back.
A lot of negatives.
A lot of negatives. But this is one character. Deborah is another one where what we know of her from Scripture, there was no negative sides to that woman. And here we have Ruth is the same way, with no character qualities that are told us.
Unless she kicked the cat or something.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, and so, but what good qualities do we see in her? Think about it. What good qualities do we see?
Loyalty.
Humble.
Obedient. Trusting. Faithful.
A servant. Industrious. She was not lazy. Integrity. She was not vain. She wasn't prideful. She wasn't spoiled or selfish. She had a positive attitude. She was obedient. Faithfulness. She was faithful to Naomi. It's amazing. It had a deep capacity for love. And I know, so when you try to put yourself in the position of Ruth, and I try to do that when I try to get in the head of the characters in the Bible as we're studying them, and I think about, could I have done that? I don't know.
What's the other one's name?
Orpah?
Yeah.
I'm thinking too. I would have just gone home to my family. The capacity to love, and so I know I've had to ask the Lord through the many years, help my capacity to love, because to deepen, because that's the only thing that will help us.
Don't you know her natural family was suffering grief?
Oh, sure. They were probably horrified that this had happened, that she left him, just ditched him forever, but yet it was all a part of a plan and purpose that God was working. And the turning for good, what had started out from a man's bad choice, God somehow turned it for good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. I thought it was interesting. That's what I was reading ahead, that they brought in Perez, because for some reason I thought Perez was Obed's son, but I got it wrong. Perez is actually
Judas.
Yes. Wasn't that kind of a tricky kinsman redeemer situation with father and daughter-in-law?
Yes.
So
because the son, Perez was the son of Tamar. Mm-hmm. And remember when we studied about Tamar, when her husband died, the brothers refused. They refused to sire a child for her. And so she tricked Judah, which was actually would have been her father-in-law. She tricked him and had these twins by him through this trickery, because they all refused to carry out the kinsman redeemer provision.
And yet God honored it.
And that's the line. It's interesting. Yeah, that's the line of Judah that Jesus comes from, is from that trickery line of the twins. The one of the twins was Perez.
God can redeem anybody.
And turn good out of situations. We've talked about it over and over again about choices, and how, yes, people can make bad choices and people can suffer because of other people's bad choices.
Daughters did,
and the daughters, yes. Naomi suffered because of the bad choice of Elimelech. The daughter-in-laws did because of what all happened in that situation. But yet, it's amazing how God can take those situations that man caused, and yet he can work somehow to work good, and his glory can come out in the end.
God is amazing how it worked out.
Yeah, God can do that. And so it's just an amazing story to think about. Now, next week, we're going to look at her primary life lesson, which, is obedience. And we're going to do just a big study about obedience and see how we can apply some of the things we learned from her, and then look and see what the Old and New Testament has to say about obedience. And then we'll be able to wrap up this study, because when men do what's right in their own eyes, that doesn't usually include obedience.
Disaster.
It's disaster. Rebellion brings disaster. We saw that over and over and over again in Judges. Rebellion started the cycle judgment coming on.
Opens the door for redemption.
But obedience opens the door for redemption. It's awesome thing. So as your homework, if you want to think of it as homework, just meditate this week on that, about the Redeemer and what Jesus did as our Redeemer. Just think about all those things. He paid the price. He bought back. He restored. He paid the debt. It's just amazing. He freed us from the blame of any sin. It's just amazing. So we don't have to sit in guilt anymore. He freed us from any blame and any guilt associated with that blame. It is truly, truly an amazing thing. He bought us back. He brought us in. He paid the price for our sin. He secured our eternal future. It's just truly, truly amazing. So meditate on that as you go home and as you lay down to sleep tonight, and think about all that he did when he redeemed us. And that can bring a lot of joy. So, Father, we are thankful for our Redeemer, Jesus. Our hearts are so grateful and overjoyed with the thought of what you did for us when Jesus came, and the price he paid, and what it did for us because of the price he paid. He redeemed us. He bought us back. He paid the price. He freed us from bondage and freed us from any obligation, freed us from blame and any guilt associated with that blame. Oh, we thank you, Lord. We thank you, Lord. Oh, it's so wonderful. There is no condemnation because of Jesus. Jesus took care of all of it and secured our eternal future by paying the price for us. We are so grateful. And we thank you for this story that helps us see it in a natural way so that we can apply it to how Jesus is our spiritual Redeemer. And it gives us so much more understanding about what Jesus did for us. And we are so thankful. And we praise you, and we are joyfully give you glory and honor. We thank you and for your provision, for your protection, and as we leave this place, and then each one will be able to live each day as ambassadors for your kingdom, and give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Amen. All right. So thanks, Corey. Good to see you. I don't know where Anita saw us, but good night, Anita, wherever you are. And anyone else who's watching, have a pleasant night, and think about Jesus as your Redeemer.
We'll see you next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Will
Good night.
See
Go ahead.
your mother and
Bless y'all.
Paul
Stop.
We'll say bye.
before.
Not before Saturday.